Hello, this is Dr. Courtney Alston. Please leave your name and message after the. Well, just kidding. Kinda. It's kind of true. Yes, you can officially leave a message with Courting Happiness. We have launched our own voicemail. We have liftoff, and I'm so happy to share that with you. You can leave a message about how the podcast has helped you, or share a question, pitch a future topic, or simply tell us that we're doing a great job. We would love to hear that, hear from you, and much more. Grab your phone, laptop, or your tablet and leave a message right now. Go to our website at drcourtneyalston.com/voicemail. That's drcourtneyalston.com/voicemail. So let's get back to the podcast. Welcome to the Courting Happiness podcast. This is a space where self-care becomes part of your day. A space where you learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Courtney Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness. And my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The Courting and Courting Happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in courting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 63. I'm Dr. Courtney Alston. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so happy that you're here. So let's talk about stress. Stress can cost us. According to the American Psychological Association, it estimates that more than $500 billion is siphoned off from the United States economy because of workplace stress, and 550 million workdays are lost each year due to stress on the job. Workplace stress is a price that our health cannot afford. So let's talk about work culture and environment and how it affects our physiology and happiness. Well, we have an expert who will empower you to get moving. Dr. Stephan Zavalin is the founder of Love to Move. He helps organizations and individuals address sedentary aspects of work and how we can really evolve in terms of our desk jobs. So if you're listening to this podcast sitting down, trust me, you're going to want to stand, twist, and take some steps moving forward, because Dr. Stephan is truly going to empower you to get moving. So let's dive in. Thank you so much, Dr. Stephan. It is a pleasure to have you here on the Courting Happiness podcast.
I am thrilled beyond belief, actually. I've been pumped all morning on my morning walk. I was like, yes, it's today. It's today.
It's so interesting. I'm so glad you said that, because I am so super excited to speak with you, because I was like, God, I got to ask Dr. Stephan, what does he recommend? Because the work that you're doing is so important as it relates to letting us understand more and more about work culture and also our health. Right. So let's talk about that a little bit. Tell us about really the value and the importance as it relates to our health and what it can mean at work, how it can almost serve us, and in some cases it can hurt us.
Right. And it's an interesting thought of we talk, you hear on your podcast, Dr. Courtney, of the happiness and kind of moving forward and finding your own way throughout all of this. And for most people, when we ask them about work and what do they feel about work, so many people, You hear the surviving or thriving at work. And so they're just surviving work. And in terms of health and physical activity, we usually think, okay, I have to do all these things outside of work to counteract what work is doing to me. Because I have to sit for work. I have to do maybe other things for work. My mental health might be suffering at work because I can't be my authentic self. And that's more and more around that work culture piece of, is it letting you do the things that your body and your mind and your soul really want you to do? Now, understandably, to a degree, yes, we have to have some kind of structures in place for it to be an organization and work. But the culture at work really should be driven by the employees and for the employees. And that's how you're going to get the best thing and the best for your health, be that physical or mental or spiritual, whatever that might be. So in terms of relating it to that, now the counter argument a lot of people go with is, okay, so we can just buy things for that, right? We can, like get a standing desk, or we can buy meditation classes for people to come in. I'm not saying they don't help, but that is only working when people are actually there. The aspect of work culture is what's happening in and out of the office. It's the general feeling and relationships and communication you have between all of the people that work together and spend so many hours together. This is the other part of where sometimes people go, yeah, I don't really have friends at work. And you shouldn't be the closest of friends maybe, but you're spending so many hours with people. You should connect with them on some level. And so it's all of this undoubtedly impacts our health.
I love so many things that you're saying, so many great information there. I loved what you shared in terms of the work culture should be driven by the employees. So for managers who are listening, who are saying, okay, how do I go about really trying to cultivate a work culture that is really going to suit my employees overall? Where do I even begin?
Oh, that's a great question. So to help them remember this, I've got three L's, and they're learn, lead, and lend a hand. And so the catch is, for learning, all of us can learn more, but this is more of learn from your employees. I love using the example of a ping pong table because I've seen it more than once, surprisingly, is when people will buy a ping pong table and say, see, I bought you all a ping pong table, but nobody plays ping pong. Or maybe it was only one or two employees that actually cared. Learn from your employees, learn what it is that they may want from their culture and how they may want to adapt their culture better and adjust appropriately. Can you do everything they ask? Probably not, but learn from them. And then if you don't know something, if they say, we want healthier foods in the break room, and you have no idea what that means, then you have to find the expert that might know that. So learning from your employees and then from other experts that can help you bring that together and bridge that gap. The next part is to lead, and it's really just leading by example. So if there's a culture that the employees really want and you're agreeing with it, you as the manager need to take charge of it. Truthfully, any of us can be a leader. In terms of movement, which is what I love talking about, it's any of us can take the stairs, stand up for calls, go for a walk at lunch, or even just stand up and take a little movement break every hour. These are things that are accessible to us. And as people see it, that builds the culture because it's now more acceptable. For me, I was always the oddball who would go for a walk at lunch. And I kept on thinking, why is this the odd thing to do? Shouldn't this be the good thing that everybody else should be doing as well?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last part is lend a hand, because that's really where managers can help. And this could be of, okay, so you're in a meeting and you're the only person standing up. Can we do a little icebreaker game at the beginning? Or can we say, hey, the meeting next Thursday is going to be a standing only meeting. So let's figure out a way for everybody to stand for that 30-minute meeting or whatever it may be. You're helping people. And this is where I go for encouragement versus facilitation. Most companies encourage. So encourage sounds like this. We at company so-and-so think that movement, for example, is great for you. We encourage you to take movement breaks. Okay, that's encouraging. I know that they're thinking about it. Facilitation sounds a bit more like, we at company so-and-so know that movement is really good for you. We have scheduled 3 5-minute movement breaks right there on your calendar. We would like you to take them. You're facilitating the actual part of it. And before any managers might get on my case and say, aren't we losing productivity? No, actually, those 5-minute breaks boost productivity even more. And it's going to be better for mental and physical health overall.
You know what? So I love what you're sharing in terms of the fact of it's being intentional and as it relates to facilitating, right? It's not simply making it this generalization saying, hey, we propose that you do this, but it's really being intentional as it relates to being proactive. Right. It's a great proactive strategy for managers. And I really, really value the fact that it's that you mentioned you've already kind of implemented it, but yet kind of encouraging and empowering your team to say, hey, it's okay. It's okay to take that. It's okay to be mobile. It's okay to walk around. It's okay to go on your lunch break and to say, you know what, I'm gonna walk around the campus or walk around, the office environment. So I love that because I think sometimes when certain things are suggested on the job or companies are working to really kind of shift levels of workplace well-being, I think it's really helpful in terms of your advice to empower people to say it's okay to do it, right? Because even though you may say this is what we're doing, but that suggestion, that strategy makes it okay for the person to say, yes, I'm going to take this break or I'm going to walk around.
I love two words they use in there. You use intention and empowering for it. And so empowering is what we hear a lot from employees is they go, yeah, I don't like this, but what am I going to do? I'm not a leader. I'm not the manager. And giving them that ability of, hey, I'm listening to you. I'm going to learn from you, and that communication and openness. You're empowering them to be the change. Granted, there was a study done to see, does the change happen from the bottom up or from the top down? And it was inconclusive. In my opinion, it has to be both. You have to meet in the middle. You can't, otherwise there's a tug of war for it all. But intention is a beautiful word for all of it. And that's something that I try to get people to do with just their normal office setup of even, where do you put your trash can? Put it somewhere with intention. Maybe you put it a little further away, so you have to stand up in order to throw something away. And that's the intention of placing it there. Maybe you try to play basketball, and maybe you're like me, you're going to miss with the paper ball and you have to get up and go and do all of that. But there's an intention behind it. And I think in general, hugely explored in this podcast specifically, is living life with intention brings you so much joy and happiness and fulfillment.
Absolutely. I love that in terms of, now so I'm talking to Dr. Stefan and I'm thinking about my studio, but yet I'm thinking about my office on campus because I'm a professor at a university. And I'm like, you know what, my garbage can is pretty close to me, and I'm like, now he's going to have me go back and do some like redecorating, so to speak, because that makes sense, right? Because if the garbage can or the trash can is a little bit further away, right, then it gives me this opportunity to move around, opposed to the workaholic in me that says, oh, no, you need to have this trash can here conveniently so it won't distract you from anything else in terms of your work. But what I'm loving, what you're sharing, is that if you take that time out for yourself, and I've learned this as relates to my area being in happiness and workplace well-being, it will serve you in terms of your productivity, right? And so yeah, I'm going to move that trash can.
Well, and maybe this is a perfect time to segue to this portion. I hear this also a lot because people go, well, I have to sit for an hour. I have to concentrate for an hour. That's how I'm going to get my best work done. So this is where I like to throw in a few stats to kind of appease that and say, hey, you're actually doing yourself a service by moving. So at about 30 minutes, we actually have less blood flowing to our brain. And so if we get up and move for 1 to 2 minutes, that gets reset. So in terms of focus and productivity, 30 minutes is about your marker of where you probably want to stand up anyway, and you shouldn't be sitting for as long. Now, if you really care about all the health things as well, at that time, we have enzymes that can decrease our metabolism by almost 90%, which basically means the amount of fat that you might be burning drops drastically. So we push so much, and this is where I get on my little almost soapbox of moving more, exercise more, do more. I think that's leading to way much burnout. I say, can we do less of the bad stuff? So can we sit a little less, or can we sit for long times a little bit less and break them up more that way? And I think that can really help you as opposed to trying to stress out of how do I do more?
I love that. And I love that you are really teaching us all in regards to the value of being proactive, but then also really coming together in terms of a level of inclusion with management as well as the team, in terms of coming together as relates to this plan. Because one of the things that I also valued that you shared was the learning aspect of really helping managers learn more about their team. What other suggestions would you recommend as relates to really becoming more insightful and really learning more as relates to the dynamics of your team and maybe their needs?
I think there is a huge part there of authenticity and vulnerability, which in this kind of a field we talk about so much. And it kind of piggybacks off the point of lead by example is if you are able to show your employees that you are vulnerable and you're being your authentic self to some degree, that is acceptable, that is a partial culture, they will be more likely to share with you and to let you know. Maybe it's such a restricted culture where people don't want to voice their opinions whatsoever, even after you do that. Of course, you can use various surveys and try to fill things in. The issue that can sometimes happen is they put in what they think you want them to put in, as opposed to really making it sort of free form and fun. It can get uncomfortable, especially sometimes with movement. There's one game that I like where you throw around a stuffed animal or a ball during a meeting back and forth while standing up. People aren't used to that. That's weird. It's strange. Why would you do that? But after doing that, all of a sudden you sort of reform and say, we're accepting of this. This doesn't have to be some kind of a huge thing where everybody does cartwheels now, but hey, let's start this conversation. And if you are an employee and you're going, I wish my manager would do that. They never do any of these things. One, share this podcast with them. That would be a really great place to start. And then start doing some of the things by yourself, because people do notice. My manager didn't used to do any of those things, and everybody noticed when I went for my walk at lunch or did some stretches in the corner. So it's going to be there. You can impact it regardless.
I love that in terms of thinking about how you can really facilitate change, right? And and literally it's interesting because you've inspired so much in terms of my thought process here. As you're sitting here, I'm like, yes, yes. And I'm trying to calm myself because I wear emotion very, very easily. It's like, yes, and I'm like trying to calm down because Dr. Stephan, you're giving such great information. Even to the point where I am thinking about as a college professor, changing levels of my culture in my classroom. As you talked about 30 minutes, I thought, wow, I have some classes that are an hour and 15 minutes. And sometimes we do activities, but sometimes we don't. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe I might want to grab a ball and and go toss it around the classroom. Can you imagine my college students in that class thinking, wow, they might think, well, this professor is something, or they might say, oh, this professor is something, right? But I love that because it starts, I tell managers this all the time when I'm training them, it starts with you. Once you understand how to really serve yourself, once you understand how to really understand the value of empathetic leadership, then it creates this ripple effect as it relates to the classroom or the company or the nonprofit. And I really, really treasure all the information that you're sharing and giving us really these great golden nuggets of information. I'm curious. So you mentioned how the employee can start doing little things for themselves. Let's talk a little bit more about some of those things. You talked about your walk, which I think is phenomenal. You talked about them kind of serving as this they can start as a facilitator for change. What are some other things outside of the walk and the trash can, which I'm going to do, and that individuals can start to slowly implement within their work environment?
So first off, to tell you the impact you can have on your students before we move on is one of my professors. It has stuck with me since this was an undergrad. It was one of my kinesiology professors. The class was an hour and 15 minutes. And he told us part of this study of that we needed to move. And every time in the middle of the class, he would have a new activity for us. I remember specifically, sometimes it was just exercises. Sometimes we danced. He would just put on a song and everybody would just dance. And at first, yeah, it was awkward. But after a while, we knew, hey, this is just what we do in this class. And that has stuck with me. Many other kinesiology classes did not as vividly stick with me. So I think you will be that professor if you do that portion of it. So in terms of what can we do, I like to start off more of kind of a timeline for people to help them. So the first part is break up the sitting, because one, that's going to get you into the habit of, oh, I'm now moving more. I'm thinking about this a little bit more. Unfortunately, that doesn't work really well with the whole sit less, don't move more part, but we're getting to that. Breaking up the sitting, 20, 30 minutes. Your absolute ideal if you can only sit for that long, but you don't have to start there. If you're the type of person that sits for 2 hours straight, starting at every 20 minutes is ridiculous. Start at it every hour, maybe every 45 minutes. Now, what is it that you do at that point? And this brings me to the next part is we think of movement a lot of times as exercise. No, movement is anything. Movement can be doing a chore. Movement can be going to get a glass of water. Anything is considered movement as long as you're not standing still. So just move, just get up and move and do something. When I started out, I had a list of either exercises, stretches, or chores that I had to do right next to me. And as soon as my timer went off, I went to the list and I went, all right, this is the thing that I'm doing next. Now it's more of an intuitive part for me. I know about when 20, 30 minutes is just because I've done it so much. And so that kind of builds up. Now, there is a limiter to this because inevitably this just tells you, okay, you need to move more, move more, move more. And maybe you're getting 10, 20 more minutes of movement throughout the day. The next part is how can you adapt what you're doing at work so that you're just not sitting for it? So I'm not asking you to do more, but maybe you're standing up during your phone calls. I like to pace during my phone calls. It helps me think a lot more. Zoom calls in standing. A lot of people complain they don't have a standing desk. I don't either. My monitor right now is up on a pile of books. Don't tell my professors. But that helps me to adjust it. And now I might have 3, 4 video calls throughout the day. That means I'm standing for all of that time. And if you're starting out, it doesn't mean you need to all of a sudden stand for half of your day. Incrementally, 30 minutes of standing for an activity, maybe an hour, and then work up to it. So finding those things that work for you, maybe it'd be a photocopier, or maybe it's when you're reading, you prop up the book as well for yourself. So it's finding the ways to change the tasks for you. And that's truly the goal for everything that I'm trying to do is change desk work to where it's now more acceptable and accessible for us to do in standing or moving.
I love that in terms of the fact of meeting people where they are and really helping us think proactively about where we are in terms of our desk work. I like how you phrase it in terms of thinking about our work at a desk, because it's interesting as you were sharing and providing these really great tips in terms of if you're sitting for 2 hours, you to what every 20 minutes might be a little challenging, right? But kind of starting slowly and really beginning to shift levels of your behavior. In the classroom, what I purposely do is I will move around. Students probably are thinking, is she looking to see what we're doing? No, I'm not. I'm actually, and I make a joke about it. I go, you know what? I pull out my Apple Watch. I go, got to get my steps in, and I do it in class. And they're like, oh, she's getting her steps in. But I'm hoping, and everything I always tell my students this is that I have a level of transparency in the classroom because I want them to learn not just what I'm teaching them in terms of the curriculum, but also also, because I teach journalism and communication, but my area being well-being and happiness, I want them to understand how to have a proactive dynamic when it comes down to their work life. And so I love what you're sharing because you're empowering us all to empower even more people by empowering ourselves. Now, I know that you have great information as it relates to anxiety and depression. And I say that because great information, because I think the pandemic speaks to this in terms of the level of stress and the uncertainty, especially that we had at one point during the pandemic. Things seem to be slowly shifting, but our it's almost like we have a new normal, so to speak, right? What do you recommend? And also, how can movement really help serve us as it relates to our anxiety and depression?
It's a wonderful question, and it's linked in so many different ways back and forth that I love talking about all of it. So the easy stat in general is that 6 hours or more of sitting a day increases likelihood of anxiety and depression. It's pretty hard not to sit 6 hours a day. That's the global average is 12 hours. We're asking for that to be cut down in half. That's not realistic at all. So what can we do? The wonderful thing is exercise we're really talking about actual workout greatly improves your mood, endorphins, and all of that. Okay, I don't have time for a full workout. I can't do that. Fair enough. 10-minute walk can completely reset your focus and really help out with that. And as you're getting up and moving, you're still getting those endorphins, as well as breathing. Breathing is going to greatly help anxiety and depression. Now, if you can do that outside or past some windows, but ideally going outside, now you're talking about the effects of natural light, which if you're able to align it with circadian rhythms, all that to say is get it first thing in the morning and then see if you can get outside as the sun is coming down. So your body's getting that input. It gets you to regulate your sleep a little bit better. And sleep is when you're really going to recover, which is going to help with your emotions, with the anxiety and the depression. Now, the beautiful thing is, yes, all of this is improved with exercise. As you're getting into the more and more of the 12 hours of sitting, there are other things that are not basically improved with exercise, and you could exercise more, but it's not enough. We need to do less of the bad stuff and to sit less in general. So take that with a grain of salt, but that's not exactly anxiety and depression. The other part about anxiety and depression is back pain. So this is the interesting stat. They looked at all the different causes of neck pain and back pain and to see what is the common denominator. And anxiety and depression were prevalent in all of them. Wow. Which is, you go, what? Back pain, neck pain? Part of that is posture. We think about the kind of posture that we're in. And so you can improve a lot of those feelings by getting into more of an aligned posture. I get on a bit of a other soapbox here of people going, good, bad posture. It's not about good or bad. I really don't think there is a good or bad. It's about how long are you in a posture? Because your body can get into the quote unquote bad posture, but it's if you spend hours and hours there, you're starting to get the back pain and the neck pain. And so as much as you can stay more upright in a neutral posture and a more sustainable posture, that is also going to influence your mood and reduce anxiety and depression.
It's interesting as Dr. Stefan is talking about posture, and I'm looking at his posture, which is his posture is fantastic, but but now it's like I'm now more conscious of my own posture. As you're sharing that, I was like, oh, okay, let me make sure I sit up straighter, right? And really practice some level of mindfulness in terms of being mindful as to the way I'm sitting, mindful in terms of, my posture. I'm going to put Dr. Stefan on the spot for a second because you inspired this, by the way. And that is, can you walk us through an exercise, in terms of how we can be really more intentional in terms of maybe either our posture or breathing, or you might have something else that comes to mind that kind of walk us through to really to get us started?
I would like to give two things here because I get asked about, well, how do I make sure that I sit up straight? truthfully, you are not going to be able to sit up straight if you don't let your chair and everything else support you properly. Not for 8 hours, not for however many hours you're sitting and working. Your muscles can't do that. It's too much. They're used to constant movement. So there are 4 steps to making sure that you set yourself up right at your desk. The steps are: bring up your monitor to eye level. And that is where the sort of top of the monitor is just above or right at eye level. Sit all the way back in your chair. And I mean all the way back, butt pressing up, making sure that backrest is flush against your back. Scoot your chair up so that way you don't have to lean forward to see your monitor, and then prop up your feet. And this is the part where people usually get sort of caught off guard. Is some people have short legs, so they scooch up in their chair so they can reach the ground. Now the backrest is doing nothing for you. But if you're sitting all the way back, you're dangling with your feet, which is actually pulling at some of the muscles that are attached to your low back. Also not a good thing. So if you can, prop up your feet as well. So to go through them again: lift up the monitor to eye level, sit all the way back in your chair, scoot your chair up, and prop up your feet. That way you're in the most supported posture. So now you're not being overworked. Your muscles are not being overtaxed, the little muscles that keep our posture up. And that's going to not fatigue you out quite as much. The next part, honestly, is make sure that you do some gentle twisting throughout the day of whatever it might be. It could be standing up and just turning slightly back and forth. It could be that whenever you're doing an exercise or any kind of little yoga position, you add a little bit of a twist. The reason is we kind of have 3 main motions. We do forwards, backwards, side to side, and twisting. Most of our day is forwards and backwards. We reach forward for a cup of coffee. Everything's in front of us. We have a little side to side. Maybe you're walking down the street and somebody goes left, you go left, they go right, you go right, and you do the little dance. But twisting, our culture uses twisting as a synonym for injury. It's not a motion that we even use. So explore the twisting and the turning and how you can use that, because that's really what's going to loosen up a lot of the muscles in your low back and throughout your body.
I would have never thought of that. In terms of the twisting dynamic, which it makes so much sense. As I'm sitting here talking to Dr. Stefan, I'm literally twisting. And it's interesting because I feel a little bit more of a relief and a release, so to speak. But I feel this relief as it relates to my muscles, probably also because of the fact that I've been sedentary, right, in terms of our time together. And also the fact that I'm talking in a microphone and have it positioned in a certain way, then all of a sudden I'm readjusting my body as it relates to the microphone. But just twisting, as you just mentioned, I actually feel good. There's this instant relief for me, which says a lot because, as I mentioned, I'm adjusting my body to all of the different devices here, so Dr. Stefan and I can have this conversation. Thank you so much. It's really great advice in regards to helping us understand really the value of being mindful, but and also giving us some great tools to be able to serve us. This is the part of the conversation. I always say this because I hate this part. As I begin to wrap up our conversation, and really an empowering conversation, Dr. Stefan, in regards to all the information that you shared. For listeners who are saying, I want to hear more from Dr. Stefan, where can they find you?
So an easy spot is my website, which is ltmmtl.com. It stands for Love to Move, Move to Love, because that's what I love to do.
I love that.
On there, you will find links to my Instagram, which is stefan.zavalin. That's where I usually post a lot of tips, things, encouraging, inspirational stuff. So if you just want little tidbits, perfectly go there. And then you can always find me on LinkedIn as well, as a great place to connect with me. And I love questions, by the way. I know a lot of people may say that, but I legitimately love a random little question. My ankle hurts. What do I need to do? Love it. I'll talk about it.
Well, I am so grateful that you shared all these wonderful, really great information in terms of research, as well as some practical tips for us to leverage and to really, really learn from our team. You've given us so much great information. I always ask this of every guest on the Courting Happiness podcast. And that question is really also about committing to your well-being, committing to your happiness, because that's what courting happiness really means and is really all about. Tell us, how do you go about, the man who helps so many individuals and organizations as it relates to our health and our bodies and being one with ourselves? I am so curious, how do you go about committing to your well-being and your happiness journey?
For me, morning walks help, to be honest with you. That's my aside. That's a little one. Movement does help, but I'm the movement guy. I get it. It's almost a given at that point. And I love exploring little exercises. But truthfully, for me, the thing when I have to dig down deep inside the core of it is, we all have our doubts. We all have our fears of, oh no, I failed at this, or this didn't go quite the same way. And for me, it's kind of pulling my inner child aside and saying, hey, I promise you, it's not as bad as you think. It is nowhere near as bad as you think. And maybe even sometimes the amazing thing I'm building up in my mind of how good it's going to be, that might also not be as good. You just have to know it's going to be fine. It's going to work out in some way, shape, or form, and you'll be okay. And then it's 3 deep breaths after that. And that usually eases a kind of discomfort where I'm really tumbling far away from happiness. And then to truly get to the other part of being happy is being authentic. As much as I try to think, well, I should like this because of whatever it may be, my friends like it. No, in the end, just go back to what you love and just do that. It may not be your job. It may be just a little fun hobby that you do. It's fine. But that's being authentic and then telling my inner child that it's going to be okay. Trust me. Those are the 2 big things for sure.
I love that. I love that you've embraced your inner child. I can relate to you in terms of that. I always think about little Courtney, I call her, along the way, and it's interesting, when my mother passed away, I often told people that that I had to learn to be a mother to myself. So I love that you're talking about embracing your inner child. I will say this, Dr. Stephan, I loved everything that you shared today, from empowering us to empower our teams, from empowering ourselves, and giving us such transformative practical tips to kind of help move us forward as I'm sitting here moving, inspired by you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My absolute pleasure.
Let's continue this conversation online. Email us at podcast@drcourtneyalston.com. That's podcast@drcourtneyalston.com. Join us on Instagram at Courting Happiness. Don't forget, that's courting with a K. Also, I hope you join our private Facebook community. You can find us at Courting Happiness Podcast Community. Our private Facebook group is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? We hope you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. Congratulations on your continued commitment to your courting happiness journey. Thank you so much for listening. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.